So verse 13, when they had gone, this is after angelic visitation and warning, the angel of the Lord appears to Joseph in a dream after the Magi have left. They had gone, and the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. Get up, he said, take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, out of Egypt I called my son. There you have it. Matthew, diabolically, only quotes the second half of the verse to trick his readers. Now, you have to think, that he must have had a very short-term mission. In other words, get them to believe until they check their Bibles. Get them to believe with the hope that they don't know the verse in their head. Because this is not a prophecy of Jesus. Out of Egypt I called my son. He's quoting from Hosea 11:1. So let's go over there and let's see what's written in Hosea 11:1. When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. But the more I called Israel, the further they went from me. They sacrificed to the Baals, and they burned incense to images, etc. It's not a prophecy of Jesus. This is not a prophecy at all. It's talking about what happened to Israel in its infancy. And God called Israel as his son. Exodus 4:22, Israel is my son, my firstborn. He called his son Israel out of Egypt. It has nothing to do with Jesus. And that's why Matthew only quoted the second part of the verse. That was a sigh. Okay, first thing, by quoting the second half of the verse, especially for Jewish readers, he was assuming they knew the whole verse. If you read rabbinic literature, the later writings of the rabbis, it is common, it is the norm to quote parts of verses with the assumption that you know the rest. It would be just as if I'm teaching and I said, for God so loved, okay, you know the rest of the verse. You can repeat it in your mind. And my point may be about the end of the verse, but I quote the beginning because you know that. What Matthew's saying, you read it two different ways. He's an idiot, he's a jerk, he's being deceptive, he's trying to trick people. He's willing to die. According to tradition, he dies for his faith, but he's stupid enough to think that he can put this here with the hope that nobody will ever look it up. The whole reason he's quoting prophecy is to get you to look it up. The whole reason he's quoting it is to get you to look back. That's the purpose of it. Okay, but the one view is he was an idiot. He had no idea how to handle the scriptures. He found this half of a verse, and now he turned it into a prophecy with the hope that nobody would ever bother. And he didn't know that one day there'd be Christian Bibles with cross-references. And you'd actually find in the margin, this is cited. He didn't know that was going to happen either, of course. So he was just hoping nobody would bother to look it up. Or you can say, Matthew quoted it with the assumption that people would know the whole verse. You say, but it's still not a prophecy. Hang on for a minute. Matthew is saying something very simple. As it happened to Israel, God's son in Israel's infancy went down to Egypt in his infancy and came out of Egypt, so also it happened to the Messiah. One of our principles of interpretation, the Messiah is the ideal representative of his people. Come on, the imagery here with Herod going to kill the baby boys in Bethlehem, just as Pharaoh tries to kill all the baby boys in Egypt, because obviously in the spirit there's a sense that there's a deliverer coming and the enemy, Satan's trying to shut it down. The same thing here. Even when you get up, go down a few more verses, verse 19, after Herod died, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who were trying to take the child's life were dead. Same as God spoke to Moses, that the people that were after his life were dead. Same parallels that happened with Moses, it happens with the Messiah. as it happens to Israel in its infancy, God's son as a nation, going into Egypt and being called out, so also it happens to Jesus. And this is Matthew's whole point, the parallel. In fact, what happens after this is the immersion in the Jordan, okay? You have Israel passing through the Jordan. You have Jesus tempted in the wilderness for 40 days as Israel was tested in the wilderness for 40 years. And then where does he give his teaching when you get to Matthew 5? He goes up on a mountain and teaches, just as Israel receives the law at Mount Sinai. These are intentional things that Matthew's saying. Look at the parallels. As it happened with Israel, it happens with the Messiah, the ideal representative of his people. All you have to say is, if you as a rabbi believe that Yeshua was the Messiah, you'd have no problem with this. You'd say, oh yes, it happened with Israel, it happened with the Messiah. But wait a second. This says, out of Egypt I called my son. Whereas this is a verse about him going into Egypt. Well, I guess Matthew didn't realize that in was different than out. Or could it be that in order to be called out of Egypt, you first had to go into Egypt? And that's why Matthew's citing this.